all parish orphans and retrogrades. Timothy Gordon here from Mississippi. Rules for retrogrades, new and improved, now from Mississippi, not California. And I'll tell you what, it feels great to be here. Welcome to the inaugural Rules for Retrogrades show with me, Timothy Gordon. We'll get one with Dave in here, and even with Chris Plants in here in a couple of days. I couldn't be more excited to be part of Mississippi and out of California. So thank you all for your generosity and your prayers as I move my family and the endeavor here to the noble South, better part of the country. Sorry, Californians, but my point of view, my distinct point of view anyway, is that California is tapped out. I'm a native Californian. I live certain parts about the state, but here I am. Thank you very much, and God bless. Now, I want to remind everybody that the Aristotle ethics class is nearly full. It's nearly done. There are only a few more spots. A few more than a few. I think about 30 spots left in the church history class. And there are plenty of spots left in the Catholic Republic class. I don't think a ton of people were notified that we put that class on offer, that it's additional, and that you can take a full fall semester course with me on the Catholic Republic, all 7 chapters. It's going to be really good because that went up a couple weeks after, and I wasn't getting pressed for the VLM stuff anymore. Anyway, if you're interested in any of those 3 classes, please go to timothyjgordon.com and click enroll. Also, if you go to the same website and click donate, or you've already done so, thank you, and thank you provisionally. Today, I'm back with you because, we already talked about Cardinal Kasper earlier in the week. We already talked briefly about this instruction that went out to the bishops by the Vatican, the German bishops in particular, and it was called Pastoral Conversion of the Parish Community in Service of the Evangelizing Mission of the Church. Not the catchiest thing you've ever heard. And we're going to talk about it today because Archbishop Bode, the usual suspect, Cardinal Marx, they were criticizing the document heavily. I didn't know what to make of it when I came to you earlier in the week. It's surprising. It's surprising because the Vatican, usually under this pontificate, quite the friend to these guys, Marx, Bode, usually Kasper, these guys seemed to come out against it in the German Bishops' Conference. Now, in some ways, the dawn of the German Bishops' Conference is Cardinal Kasper. He was the guy that came up with a scheme that ended up being christened, if we can use the term lightly, in Amoris Laetitia. He'd been trying to get communion for the civilly divorced and remarried for 30 years. He was rejected, rebuffed, and sent packing by John Paul II. He was part of the St. Gallen Mafia. He's St. Gallen Mafia alum, one of the main guys. He was also the former president of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, which makes sense because he's an ecumeniac. He's been in high places, and for 30 years he bode his time. It makes sense that he would have been one of the prime guys against Ratzinger coming into the pontificate and wanting Francis, which was the project of the St. Gallen Mafia. I brought you lots of material on that. Solo with Dave here on Rules for Retrogrades or with Taylor Marshall on TNT. It makes sense in light of this stuff because he got what he wanted eventually with communion for the civilly divorced and remarried, with Amoris Laetitia, and with Querida Amazonia, which we went away from talking to you about with the BLM news and the COVID hoax, all of that. We haven't been talking about it for the last 5 months, even though it's news making. Lots is going on behind the scenes. And this pastoral conversion letter sent out by the Vatican, pastoral conversion of the parish community in service of the evangelizing mission of the church, just rolls right off the tongue. It is news as per Querida Amazonia. File it under Querida Amazonia news. Okay, so it came out on July the 20th, and I made a brief remark about it in the McCarrick video I did last week. 1 week to the day after that, on July 27th, there was a commentary given by Cardinal Walter Kasper on Dom Radio in Cologne, Germany, where Walter Cardinal Kasper said that his fellow German bishop critics who were bishops of the document, missed the document's central point. And here we're well advised to listen. He did not expect, Cardinal Kasper, that this would be a globally recognized interview, a globally heard or commentated on interview. And so he's being honest insofar as he can remind his German fellows in the episcopate, let's use weaponized ambiguity. We're sure that this pontificate, this curia, this magisterium under Francis will be using weaponized ambiguity. And so he was being honest that as far as he could. You know, he was reminding them, let's be honest with each other. Let's use the dishonest language. And that's all the Vatican was doing. Here's what he said. The main point, according to Walter Cardinal Kasper, German criticism completely misses the actual concern of the instruction, pastoral conversion to a missionary footing. Now, ostensibly, he's addressing the 2019 statistics, which showed a high rate of attrition, higher than average contemporary rate of attrition, Germans leaving Catholic churches. That sounds faithful. That sounds fine. That sounds Catholic. Here's what he actually means by a conversion to a missionary footing. He means the goals of Querida Amazonia. Female deacons and removing a celibate priesthood. That's what he means. Okay, so, and I'll show you how and why I think he means that. Completely missed the point, Germans. Here's why. Because the pastoral conversion to a missionary footing is the main purpose of the letter sent out, the pastoral conversion letter. Now, even from the outset, ostensibly, this statement by Cardinal Kasper would make no sense. He would essentially be saying, German bishops, don't fret. You know, you thought that this was just a letter about the pastoral conversion of the parish, which is in the title. It's called the pastoral conversion of the parish. I'm not going to read all the rest of the copy to you in the titular. Pastoral conversion of the parish, let's call it that in short. He's saying, you guys missed the main point. The main point, Germans, was the pastoral conversion to a missionary footing. This proves there's something more going on with the weaponized ambiguity of the document itself, the weaponized ambiguity of Cardinal Kasper's call to the German bishops to see more clearly the clear ambiguity weaponized into the document, if that makes sense. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, it's essentially this. How and why could the German bishops, smart cats, these are smart cats, they're clever, I'd argue, foes of the real mission of the church. How could they miss that the central purpose of this document is the pastoral conversion, right? When it's right there in the title. Okay, so remember who Kasper is. I've already said it a couple times, but I've given a lot of airtime to Walter Cardinal Kasper because he's St. Gallen Mafia. Of course, Cardinal Martini was sort of the dawn of the St. Gallen Mafia, which was, met for 9 years, starting in the second half of the 1990s, once a year in St. Gallen to accomplish one goal, to keep Pope Benedict from becoming Pope, really at the time was Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, the presumptive candidate of choice after JP2, from becoming Pope, and to get, they even located who they wanted, one Bergoglio of Argentina. That was it. They didn't get their goal in 2004. They ended up getting it in 2013. And this is 2012, sorry. And this tells you everything you need to know about their goals. And the first things they've done, according to 2 of the 4 dubia cardinals, were the first things they said they were going to do. The communion for the civilly divorced and remarried, which Cardinal Kasper had been attempting to do since 1980. And then the couple goals entailed by all of that, which went into the Amazon Synod. And those of us who are cynical enough to see the design in the document, Querida Amazonia, female diaconate, and the priestly celibacy. Now, the real goal, according to Walter Cardinal Brandmuller, is a Protestantization of the entire church, which makes sense. Priesthood of all believers, priestly celibacy gets you closer to that, and to end the sexual mandates of the Roman Catholic Church and of the natural law. So no more restriction on communion for the civilly divorced or remarried. They already got that, right? And then basically female diaconate. This makes it much closer to priests and deacons are just helpers. They're not male specific. They're not really anyone specific. It's the priesthood of all believers. So this is who Kasper is, for those of you who have forgotten. And he's saying, Germans, you need to look at the document again. Wink, wink. There is tons of gold here for us who do not like the idea of the laity. Think priesthood of all believers, Martin Luther, the Reformation never left Germany. The guys and the girls in the pews should be participating more in the Mass, which we've been hearing, the last 60 years, and it's dangerously Lutheran. He's saying, even though it seems like ostensibly the document calls us away from extra participation, it doesn't. And Cardinal Kasper says, here, I'm going to show you how. And of course, again, remember, he was former president of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity. This really means he's trying to make friends with the Protestants, which is cool. Remember the axis of hatred that Pope Francis's Querida described in 2017, summer of 2017? He said, this is in America. Well, right-wing Protestants and right-wing Catholics in America could and should and really are friends, should be friends, could be friends, are friends. That's not what Cardinal Kasper headed as the former president of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity. He wants these Catholics and Protestants not just to link hands on relevant social issues where by virtue of being Christian, they already agree together and fight together against the secular humanists. No. He wants, by Christian unity, to designate a kind of capitulation by Catholics to Protestants on these 3, 4, 5 specific issues where we eventually turn the Catholic Church Protestant. That's Cardinal Kasper's project. That's the big goal. And that's what he's reminding his fellow Germans can be done if they only read this document more closely and apply it to Querida Amazonia. So he's not just talking about the high attrition rates in the 2019 German church. No. Here's why not. Kasper argues that the text's critics, like Cardinal Marx and Archbishop Bode, overlooked the instruction's opening section and its summary. I guess it's précis, published précis. So this is strange when you consider, okay, he's saying the title contains the main idea and you guys missed it. That's strange because people don't usually miss what's in titles. And now he's saying also you overlooked the opening section. This does sound like Querida Amazonia, the exhortation released by Pope Francis, post-synodal to the Amazon Synod. He says, this opening section, which you guys missed, my fellow liberal German prelates, emphasized the common responsibility of the people of God for parishes. The common responsibility for parishes. He's saying this, look, compadres, confreres, you guys are so worried that Pope Francis is calling you away from the common responsibility that lay people have for parishes. Well, look at the opening section. It even calls the lay people the people of God, which is typically one of the terms from the lexicon of the ecumeniac's, guide to weaponized ambiguity. That's usually what they mean when they say, no, people of God can be a perfectly holy term. But usually they use that term for lay people when they're being ecumenical, when they're being crazy about ecumenicality. So he's saying, go read the first section again, and also go read the summary again. Why do I keep saying this sounds like Querida Amazonia? I'm going to call you to paragraph 2 and 3 of the document. Conservatives in America were saying, oh, this is great. This is a great, faithful conservative document. They're celebrating. And I was saying no. Steve Skojec at the time when it was published was saying no. Look at paragraphs 2 and 3. How do you miss the opening salvos, man? Well, a lot of people do, because then Querida Amazonia got to a more trustworthy conservative sounding kind of center for several paragraphs. And it sounds like this document followed the same course, and it's written ostensibly by the same hand, the pontiffs. So the objections, Kasper say, then the needless objections, the wayward objections, centered upon the document's insistence that canonically, critics like Marx and Bode will show, only priests can direct the pastoral care of parishes. Well, of course, that's what a priest is. That's what it means to be a Roman Catholic priest. You are in charge of directing the pastoral care of the parish. I don't have the coffee machine up yet. This is, by the way, I'm up in the new studio at the new Mississippi house. We got no furniture. I'm stacking on a kitty litter tower and a diapers box. The mic. I got my camera stand, got the computer plugged into the wall on the ground here. It's gonna look really good. Should look really sharp once we get everything up and running. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm happy to be talking Catholic news once again. You guys noticed that because of the events, microscopically in my life, macroscopically in the church and the world, in June and July, I was doing lots of shows related to Black Lives Matter. For one thing, lots of people had interest in doing those shows with me, and I was pleased to oblige. I was pleased to do an extra helping of shows on rules for retrogrades. Pleased to cover this topic in toto, and I'm going to keep doing that. Had Alan Keyes on most recently on it, but over the course of those 2 months now, between the present and then almost, lots has happened in the church, and it's been able to happen just under the ice because everyone, Catholic commentators included, have got their eyes more on the events of the upcoming election, which involve the BLM, anti-Christian, Marxist, terrorist, organized race riots, and COVID hoax. COVID 2019, whatever you want to call it. That whole thing, that whole constellation of historical events centered upon late 2019, early 2020, and the coming election, which they have much to do with ostensibly, they have collected the attention of all of us on the right, including the Catholic right, and they're important to do shows on. I have some exciting political guests coming up that will blow your mind. Big names. More central to politics of today than even Dr. Alan Keyes, which I'll announce in a few short days. So we'll get back to that, but there's a lot of ecclesiastical stuff that's been able to fly under the radar of the Catholic commentariat, and I don't want to let it go wholly without at least one of us detecting it, pointing it out, analyzing it, scrutinizing it, spitting it back at them. Because, we Catholic commentariat, in America particularly, are the main ones that catch this stuff. So that's why we've gone to some McCarrick stuff, some Cardinal Kasper stuff, my old friends from, the Marxist part of the church, and the St. Gallen Mafia part of the church. Remember, by the way, McCarrick visited St. Gallen several times. The Communist Training Center now, according to Church Militant's reportage, is coming out. So he knows these guys. He knows them very well, the St. Gallen Mafia, even though it's formal, personnel, its formal participants were really only the Northern European members who opposed Ratzinger and favored Pope Francis Bergoglio. But McCarrick is presumably very in with these guys, just as he's very in with China, and made that happen. So again, Kasper is calling his friends to realize that this is a good liberal Catholic document against its presumptive implications. So the priests are not the only ones, he's saying, called to the pastoral care of parishes. He's saying, okay, and here's where we're going to go into Querida Amazonia. All tasks not completely innate or intrinsic to the priesthood can be delegated. This is the D word, the worst D word you could think of when it comes to ecclesiastical matters. Delegation of priestly duties. Now, we're going to talk about communion and confession as the only two, because the liberal German prelates and Northern European prelates seem to admit this, at least as tender on the table, right up front. Okay, these are the only two, it seems to be implied, that are not, that are completely central to the ontological status of a Roman Catholic priest. Confession and communion, right? And we're not going to try for these now. But what they're going to do is they're going to force change at the corners, crinkle at the corners, not at the center first. And they're going to say everything else is delegable. I'm giving you the long and the short of it, the subtext. Everything else is ostensibly delegable because it's not confession and or communion. So that's what we're going to see, and that's why we're going to look at paragraphs 2, 3, I think 88, 89, 103 of Querida Amazonia in just a second. And that's where the clues lie, that Kasper's operating from that playbook laid out by Francis, Querida Amazonia, and now the second big clue, also laid out by Francis, written by the hand of Francis, is this pastoral conversion of the parish community in service of the evangelizing mission of the church. It goes hand in hand with it, and we're going to see what tasks are delegable to non-deacon women. All they're doing is saying that the title buzzwords, these are non-deacon women. They're going to do everything central to deacons. That's the key. Forget celibacy for a second. I guess we're mainly talking about handing out, delegating more and more of, forget priest duties even for now, deacons' duties. Okay, these women aren't deacon. They're just doing everything deacons do. What are the only two real ostensible functions of the priest that are completely seeded by this document and by Cardinal Kasper and by Pope Francis as non-delegable? Confession and communion. And by communion, they probably mean consecrating hosts alone. So see how they, after saying we're banishing the notion of female diaconate, we're inviting it right back in, because now we're just saying the only two things that are non-delegable are priestly duties. No deacons' duties whatsoever. See how clever these guys are with the weaponized ambiguity? They've trained for years. Remember, Kasper was a communio guy. He literally left the concilium with Ratzinger at Vatican II. There's some okay communio guys, none that I'm a huge fan of their theology, but some okay ones that are way less bad, like Ratzinger or Louis Bouillet. And then there's some outright leftists that said, no, concilium is too bad a journal going on right after the council. And they left, but they're leftist. They left concilium for communio just like Ratzinger et al. Kasper was one of those guys. He's everywhere. Like Ratzinger himself, Kasper he knows where all the bodies are buried. You guys have to realize that. This guy is one of the most important dons of the Northern European Church, if not the guy behind the guys. Okay, so we're talking about delegation. We're going to talk about Querida Amazonia to give gloss to where am I getting these stark notions about what Kasper's really winking at and pointing at. He says he's grateful, that's a direct quote, that the document sidesteps celibacy and female ordination. We've been talking too much about this. That doesn't mean that he's ceding the topic. It means he's ceding the terms. Ceding the terms makes it easier to win the topic. As I know this from the study of jurisprudence, right? The judicial realists who wanted to destroy textualism and just let federal judges do whatever they wanted to do to legislate from the bench. They said, let's just get rid of the troublesome terms. That doesn't mean we're getting rid of the content, the notions. Let's just ditch the terms. Bella Dodd said she'd heard tons of American communists say this. Let's ditch the term communism. Let's go to democratic socialism. Let's go to inclusivity. Let's go to all the race language, the critical theory language. This is what leftists do. Weaponized ambiguity and language creation. Weaponized ambiguity together with new language creation. That the middling and lower intellects out there, they can't connect the dots because they're new. It's a new lexicon altogether. This is what they do. People, I've studied this in critical theory and philosophy. I've studied in jurisprudence and law. And yeah, I'm not a credentialed theologian. I'm a Thomistic philosopher / jurisprude, lawyer guy. That's what gives me the extra angle, the extra step, you know? These leftist theologians, they have a fast first step, as we say in basketball. I know where they're going. I've seen it play out in philosophy and law. He's grateful, Cardinal Kasper is, that the document sidesteps celibacy and female ordination. He says it goes without saying in today's business culture that such employees are not mere assistants. It doesn't go without saying. For one thing, it doesn't go without saying that business culture ought to be the exemplar or the model for ecclesiological culture, ecclesiological organizational structures in the first place. But even then, it doesn't really go. It might be kind of a trend in today's hipster business model to say our employees are not mere assistants. They're stakeholders, is what they say. They're mere assistants, man. You're just playing on the socialistic, democratic as against Republican, both small d, small r, the democratic, socialistic, social impulse that's popular right now. The Jacobinist thing, the proletarian thing. To say, oh, you're not just sweeping the floors, you're a stakeholder in the company. I want to hear from the rank and file. I'll tell you what, man, nothing is more condescending than that. You are, for the moment, it doesn't mean you'll always be that, you are to that boss that's telling you that, they don't care about your ideas, even in today's business model. You are just the guy sweeping the floors. Now, you can work your way up. You can be president of that company in a land like America, or at least the former America, with the American dream. But it's not true that you can now. And anyone that says you can now is a socialist or something very sympathetic, someone very sympathetic to a socialist. But it does not, needless to say, go without saying in today's business culture that such employees are not mere assistants. But what's he saying? He's talking about Susan from the parish council. He's talking about, I guess, in Germany, Olga from the parish council. All the Susans and Olgas and Karens out there, they're not just mere assistants. They can really direct, the D word here, they can direct, well, the D word's delegate, but because of delegation, they can really direct parishes. Even though this Vatican instruction is kind of saying, no, they can't. We can't have this much participation, Vatican II buzzword, of the laity. They're kind of funning y'all. That's what they're doing. They're really saying with a wink and a nod, yes, that because it goes without saying in today's business culture that such employees are not mere assistants. They're saying they're kind of in charge. Everyone's in charge. Priesthood of all believers. The Reformation never left Germany or Northern Europe. It never left the St. Gallen Mafia. And not that conservative, evangelical American Protestants are in league with socialists. That's stupid. They're part of the ecumenism of hatred, according to Francis's 2017 Curia, right? Antonio Spadaro is the one that said this. That's an ecumenism of hatred. American Protestants, particularly evangelicals, are different. But Protestantization in a Lutheran sense in the church, in the German Catholic Church, that is what the Marxists, the globalists, the Masons are using to destroy religion. Well, there's only one true religion. It's Roman Catholicism. Okay? So it's a different context for Protestantism. In America, they're friendlies, and there's no skullduggery. It's just our Protestant brethren, particularly evangelicals, probably all around me, I've probably got several as I speak here in Mississippi, they just need to be given the sacraments. They don't know. But they are good guys that just need the sacraments. We need to give them the sacraments. The Vatican's making it very hard to do, which is evident by these 2019 German numbers. They're happy about it. We're sad. The ultimate goal, according to James Grine, McCarrick victim lately, is complete destruction of the one true faith. And we already knew this. This is what the priesthood of all believers out the mouths of Lutheran crypto-Protestants within the church are. That's not the goal of American evangelical Protestants. You got to distinguish. Those Masons, St. Gallen Mafia alum, Marxists within the church, like McCarrick and the St. Gallen Mafia, they don't want Protestantism because they think it's the true form of Christianity, the way a lot of my evangelical brethren across the street or in the house next to me think. They want Protestantism within Catholicism because they know that Protestantization of the church is a form of secularism. Protestantism is a form of secular Christianity without the sacraments and without ecclesiastical structures. That's why they want it. Completely opposite motive. All right, so the instruction intended to prevent top-down, get this term from Kasper, neo-clerical authoritarianism. It sounds like it represents what the German bishops would call top-down neo-clerical authoritarianism. So again, he's taking what the document says according to its critics, who are eyeing it suspiciously, and he's saying it's saying the exact opposite. We just have to bend the language a little bit, and we're not even bending it because Pope Francis, remember, he wrote this in secret ink for us, for the liberal German and Northern European prelates, the ones that really elected Francis, the St. Gallen Mafia guys, the ones that wanted him in 2004 and lost. He was second in the voting at that conclave by a narrow margin, even though he was an unknown, to Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger. Now, it's written in secret ink for these guys, and all Kasper's doing is reminding his friends in the German Bishops' Conference, this is our time, baby. This was written for us. Okay, so if it sounds like I made a bunch of speculative claims, listen to, and this is all from the July 27th commentary on Dom Radio in the Cologne Archdiocese. Kasper's pointing out that all of his friends who were the critics of this instruction, pastoral conversion of the parish community in service of the evangelizing mission of the church, they missed a bunch. Here's Querida Amazonia. Let me liken it to this instruction recently, written by the same hand, ostensibly Francis's. The beginning is where all the load-bearing parts are located. It's the locus in quo of the real meaning of the document. According to Kasper, that's true of the instruction. According to me and Steve Skojek, it's true of Querida Amazonia. Listen to paragraphs 2 and 3. This is Francis. During the synod, I listened to the presentations and read with interest the reports of the discussion groups. In this exhortation, which he's about to unfold, I wish to offer my own response to this process of dialogue and discernment. I will not go into all the issues treated at length in the final document. Doesn't that sound like what Kasper's doing? Let's get away from celibacy and female diaconate. I'm not going to go into all this. Both Francis and Kasper are saying this. Nor do I claim to replace that text or duplicate it. He's not going to duplicate it, Francis, here, because he wants the final document, the very, very controversial final document, to be read and presented and to be considered an attachment to this document. We'll get to why I think that in a minute. I merely wish to propose a brief framework for reflection that can apply concretely to the life of the Amazon region, a synthesis of some of the larger concerns that I've expressed in earlier documents that can help guide us to a harmonious, creative, and fruitful reception of the entire synodal process. Now here's paragraph 3. This is the real money one that concerned me, and I guess Steve Skojic, and I guess really no one else in the Catholic commentariat. Everyone was like, oh, Querida Amazonia seems to be a conservative victory. Nay. I say nay. At the same time, Francis continues, I would like to officially present the final document. Which sets forth the conclusion of the synod, which profited from the participation of many people who know better than myself or the Roman Curia the problems and issues of the Amazon region since they live there. Wait a minute. Couple things. Presentare, to present, does not just mean to point at something. This verb has multiple meanings. It can also mean an attachment. In documentary contexts, to present, if I'm like, hey, I want to present you my CV, in an email, I write that inline, and then the CV is attached, I would use the verb, I want to present this to you. It represents an attachment. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is that he says that the final document profited from the participation of many people who know better than myself or the Roman Curia the problems and issues of the Amazon region. Okay, listen to me. This is the distinction between fact and law. Pope Francis is being really slippery here. Why do you ever attain an attorney? You know the fact pattern of what happened to you much better. You have to relate it to him. It's all about consulting an expert, which is what the magisterium of the Roman Catholic Church is supposed to be. They help you apply the law to the facts of your situation. So the people of the Amazon region know the particular facts of their situation better than the experts, the theologians, but the theologians alone are responsible for applying the law, and by that I mean the law of God, the magisterial law, the scriptural law, the law of Roman Catholic tradition, to the particular facts. We don't have enough priests because we live in a forest or whatever. That is why you need experts. So he's misleading here. And it's misleading to say, it's intentionally misleading, I believe, to say, oh, really, the person knows better than the lawyer because he knows the facts of the situation. Every human being who has ever retained a lawyer knew the facts better than the lawyer. You have a recollection of those facts, of the car accident. Your lawyer doesn't. He's just trusting your imperfectly articulated recollection of the car accident or whatever you retained him for. You get him not because you know better, you get him because he knows the law being applied to those facts better. And facts aren't that important. They can be relayed. The law, knowledge of the law is the real expertise. It's where the real finesse comes in. It's what you pay the big bucks for. So it's very misleading of Francis, one, to make this attachment by presentare, the verb presentare, to present. I was going nuts when I read this. In the legal context, to present it means an attachment. In the technological context, sending an email, it means an attachment. In the philosophical context, if you say, oh, I'm presenting Exhibit A with this argument, it's an attachment. In the scientific context, if you make a presentation, it means an attachment. And then the second point is that the real experts ought to be the Roman Curia, who he's saying the Amazonians know better. Well, of course they know the issues. They don't know the law better. He continues, they experience its suffering and they love it passionately. I've preferred not to cite the final document in this exhortation, Weaponized Ambiguity. He's not going to cite it because I would encourage everyone to read it in full. So now he has not only presented it, which already makes the document, I would argue, something very akin to an attachment, which makes it part of the paper, makes it part of or nearly a part of the exhortation itself. And then he doesn't stop there. He also says everyone, meaning all the Roman Catholic faithful, need to read it in full. Okay? So just as Kasper said, hey, Germans, go see to the first part of the document and the summary. Me and Steve Skojek were saying, hey, Catholics, Querida Amazonia is not good. It did not punt on celibacy or female diaconate, right? It is presenting, attaching the final document, which had all these bad, troublesome sections, and then it just neglects to mention or reduplicate those sections. And he's even self-referential, Francis, in what he says. I'm not going to do it. I want everyone to read it, and I've already presented it. Give me a break. Let me read from you paragraph 88. This establishes the need for more sacraments. This is where the concept of delegation becomes so important. And Cardinal Kasper, I believe, is winking and nodding to this section today, or on July the 27th, rather. The priest is a sign of that head and wellspring of grace, above all when he celebrates the Eucharist, the source and sum of the entire Christian life. That sounds very Catholic. That is his great power, a power that can only be received in the sacrament of holy orders. That sounds very Catholic. For this reason, only the priest can say, this is my body. That sounds very Catholic. There are other words, too, that he alone can speak. I absolve you from sin. That sounds very Catholic, but now these are the only two. Confession and communion are the only two non-delegable duties. They're not duties of the deacon, by the way. So they're not really taking anything as non-delegable off the plate for the priesthood of all believers, the diaconate of all believers. That's what I'm going to start calling it. Because these are the only two. There are more than these two duties that are non-delegable, that are essential to priests, not merely accidental to them. But there are none that pertain to deacons. No non-delegable duties being mentioned here that pertain to deacons. That's the trick. So the only other words mentioned are confession words. Because sacramental forgiveness is at the service of a worthy celebration of the Eucharist, these two sacraments lie at the heart of the priest's exclusive identity. I forget this line. So they say these are the two sacraments that lie at the heart of the priest's exclusivity. Now, I guess theoretically you could talk about another dimension, a third dimension of the priestly, essential properties that lies near the heart, but that's not what they're doing. They're saying these are really the only two non-delegable things. Anything besides confession and communion. Listen to the next paragraph in Querida Amazonia. Think of Cardinal Kasper. In the specific circumstances of the Amazon region, particularly in its forests and more remote places, a way must be found to ensure this priestly ministry. The laity can proclaim God's word, teach. Okay, listen to this. What does this even mean? The laity can proclaim God's word, yes. Teach, yes. Organize communities. That sounds like PICO. People organizing communities or something. I forget what it is, but this is Cardinal Maradiaga, the Pope's best friend, who worked with George Soros front groups to create the Catholic Spring in America. Organized communities. This sounds like Barack Obama, not the Roman Catholic Church. The laity can also celebrate certain sacraments. Which ones? Which ones can we do? We can't do confession or communion. Baptism only in emergencies. Weaponized ambiguity. Only in emergencies. If your newborn's about to die, you can baptize him real quick. Can't perform matrimony. What are the others? Can't perform confirmation. You need the bishop for that. Can't perform last rites. A priest like McCarrick that's been defrocked, who has the ontological mark of priesthood, can do it still, but you can't, even in an emergency. What's the only other one? That's 6. Is that 7? Maybe that's all 7. There's only one. The priest, the laity cannot, under ordinary circumstances, celebrate certain sacraments. And he said certain sacraments. There would be one only anyway, even if we counted emergency baptisms. Weaponized ambiguity, people. They're talking about what the laity can already do that are not communion and confession. The laity can seek different ways to express popular devotion and develop the multitude of gifts that the Spirit pours out in their midst. I don't even know what that means. No one does. It's weaponized ambiguity, right? That's the point. But they need the celebration of the Eucharist because it, quote, makes the church. This sounds very, very Catholic, actually. Quoting from very Catholic documents, the laity needs the Eucharist because it makes the church. This sounds way, way ecumenical. Sounds really anti-Protestant. Listen to this part. We can even say that, quote, no Christian community is built up which does not grow from and hinge on the celebration of the most holy Eucharist, end quote. Whoa, that's super Catholic and super true. It is true. No Christian community is built up. They're even talking about the Protestant congregations. So like, you can't build it up without the Eucharist. And you can't have the Eucharist unless you're Catholic. Super. I love that. This is what Francis does. He peppers this stuff in to get the chirping sectaries saying what a faithful document it is. And then it worked upon the release of the post-synodal exhortation, Querida Amazonia. You see what he's doing here? If we are truly convinced that this is the case, then every effort should be made to ensure that the Amazonian peoples do not lack this food of new life and the sacrament of forgiveness. So there's the lie. There it is. Boom. They're saying, oh, they're sparsely populated in the Amazon. Someone did a study. They're about as sparsely populated as American inner cities with church depletion. But who cares? It's just a talking point anyway. They need the sacraments, so we're going to delegate these duties. That's what Kasper's after here, and he's talking about German churches in 2019. He's not talking about Amazonian churches. Okay, here's an apparent prohibition against the female diaconate that, again, Kasper's keen to, and everyone else missed. Everyone thought this is a great, faithful section, conservative section of Querida Amazonia. Had lots of debates on this, even with my brother. He says, lest we restrict our understanding of the church to her functional structures, in other words, being reductionist, such a reductionism would lead us to believe that women would be granted greater status and participation in the church only if they were admitted to holy orders. Sounds pretty good. He's sounding like he's saying, let's admit them, but not to holy orders. Let's deny them to holy orders. But that approach would in fact narrow our vision. What does that mean? They're narrowing that's the key sentence in that apparent prohibition. No, Francis is saying. It would narrow the St. Gallen Mafia's vision of laity participation, priesthood of all believers, if we merely thought that women could be, their position in the church, I don't even know what that means, their status, could be enhanced by making them priests. No, we're going to make everyone priests, at least functionally, at least materially, if not formally. Actually, more like formally without materially, though that's not a thing in Platonism. We're going to give the roles of all these priests to all of the laity. This is the real point of today's video. We, the Germans, are going to give the role of priests to everyone as far as we can get away with it. We're just not going to give the titles. Okay? It would narrow our vision to do what the people want to do, call it a female diaconate. It would lead us to clericalize women. Remember, this is the C word for them, clericalize. That's bad. We don't want to clericalize anyone. We want to declericalize the entire church and have the priesthood of all believers. That's the subtext. It would diminish the great value of what they have already accomplished and subtly make their indispensable contribution less effective. Listen to this excerpt now. Here are women deacons, just not in title. It appears lower on the, section 89. The present situation requires us to encourage the emergence of other forms of service and charisms that are proper to women and responsive to the specific needs of the peoples of the Amazon region at this moment in history. And note how Cardinal Kasper, in July 27th, response on the radio, on Dom Radio in Cologne, Germany, to the instruction of July 20th by the Vatican against the German church, calls the exact same thing, but not in Amazon region. Paragraph 103, this is key, then we're going to wrap up here. In a synodal church, those women who in fact have a central part to play in Amazonian communities should have access to positions, including ecclesial services, don't know what that means, that do not entail holy orders and that can better signify the role that is theirs. Don't know what that means either. Here it should be noted that these services entail stability, don't know what that means, public recognition, and a commission from the bishop. Don't know what that means. What do you mean, public recognition of new services? Oh, the woman's, answering a phone call in the parish office. We should all recognize that, and we should get a recognition from the bishop, a commission from the bishop to answer the phone in the parish office and to take a message for the pastor. What? What does that even mean? Weaponized ambiguity. This is their food. Weaponized ambiguity together with implied meaning that's probably been pre-defined in some lexicon. Hey, when we say this, they have the shadow council, they have the shadow synod, they meet at the Greg a lot of times, my old school, and they say, hey, when we say this term, it's weaponized ambiguity. What we really mean is this. Check your guidebook. Check your crypto lexicon. This would also allow women, he continues, to have a real and effective impact on the organization. Think of what Cardinal Kasper says about the business model of the participation of even the lowest, newest employees. He continues, the most important decisions, sounds like Kasper, and the direction of communities, sounds like Saul Alinsky, while continuing to do so in a way that reflects their womanhood. Again, don't know what that means. Weaponized ambiguity is killer. So it's all about weaponized ambiguity with preordained implied meaning. So they're operating, when they use certain of these terms, look at them crossways, man. They literally have preordained terms that they're going to, and they're like, okay, this means this. And the proof is that Kasper is using almost the exact same concepts, if not terms. He's making use of the exact same concepts. So what you ought to be looking out for, just to boil it all down, what you ought to be looking out for is a kind of functional rapprochement of those duties associated with ordaining women to the diaconate, associated with a kind of priesthood of all believers, which would be insinuated by having celibate priests, right? These are the two big things. What do we do to men? This is the Germans, this is the liberals, this is the Masons in the church, this is St. Gallen Mafia, this is all the bad guys who have infiltrated the church. What do we do to make the church Protestant, priesthood of all believers? And there are no real distinction between priests and laity. Well, we got to do something to men, we got to do something to women to make a crypto priesthood of all believers, which is a term that Martin Luther used, right? The Reformation never left Germany, even in the church. Okay, to men, just make the men who are priests, make them celibate. If you make them celibate, then they look just like all the laity. To the women, give them the roles of deacons. You've taken them. It might not be 100% priesthood of all believers yet, but that would be the biggest step taken ever outside of 1517, and those people aren't Catholic. Those people became these Christians who are outside the church, whatever that means. We created a new class for them in 1517 after the Reformation. Walter Cardinal Brandmüller said, one of the four dubia cardinals, that their three goals were Amoris Laetitia, the two ostensible goals of Querida Amazonia. And then he said the big picture is eventually a priesthood of all believers. He said this in 2014, in 2013, before there was any evidence of them taking these steps. Communion for the civilly divorced and remarried, female diaconate, and a non-celibate priesthood. He said this in 2014. How did he know, folks? And it happens to be one of the 4 dubious cardinals that have opposed Francis. How did he know that? I wish I had the direct quote for you here, but I've read it in other shows. Maybe I'll include it in the show notes. They're still after the same goals. Liberals never relent. They're trying to Protestantize the church, not because they, like American evangelicals, believe Protestantism is better, or this is the way out of clericalism, or corruption within the magisterial hierarchy. No. They are the corruption within the magisterial hierarchy. They know this isn't the solution. They know it just is the way. They understand better than the American, the good guys who are American evangelical Protestants. They know that this just destroys Christianity, right? This destroys the true form of Christianity, Roman Catholicism. It's sacramental. They know it secularizes Christianity to not have the sacraments, to not have an ordained class of a sacerdotal order of priests, to not have an apostolic lineage. This is the big thing. Without an apostolic lineage, this guy was ordained by this guy, was ordained by this guy, and it goes all the way up to Peter and the apostles. But you don't have a church. Without a church, you don't have Christianity. So all these Protestant moves to the sacraments, to the personnel, and to the priesthood of all believers, elevating the laity by this ecumenism and by this obsession with lay participation, it's just a back road way to accomplish the same thing. God be with us. God help us. God bless you. Deus Volt. Enroll for classes. Go to timothyjgordon.com. Only a few positions left in that Aristotle class. A few more in the church history class. A lot in the Catholic Republic class. Please see to my Patreon account, Dave's Patreon account if you can. And I really appreciate your time. I'll see you next time from Mississippi, United States of America. Anno Domini 2020, the year of our Lord. We're taking it back this election.